Hello, and welcome to Life's Dirty Little Secrets. I'm Chris McCurry.
And I'm Emma Waddington. I am delighted to have two fantastic guests on our podcast today. Manuela O'Connell and Dr. Robyn Walser are both here today to talk to us about existentialism. And I will start by introducing Dr. Robyn Walser, who is a licensed clinical psychologist, author, and internationally recognized expert in acceptance and commitment therapy. We all know and love her work. Her notable works include The Heart of Act, which is a fantastic book with a chapter on existentialism, and her more recent book, You Are Not Your Trauma, which was published in July this year. And in January, she and Manuela are publishing Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, Deliberate Practice to Develop and Enhance Skills in ACT, which sounds like a terrific book. Dr. Walser's work bridges the gap between existential philosophy and practical therapeutic approaches, helping people live meaningful lives while confronting difficult realities. And we are so excited to have her join us on the podcast to explore existentialism and its applications to life and death. Welcome, Robyn. Happy to be here.
And welcome, Manuela. Manuela O'Connell is a professor at Universidad Favalaro and a trainer of acceptance and commitment therapy and mindfulness throughout South America. She earned her psychology degree at the Universidad de Belgrano, Buenos Aires, Argentina, where she currently lives. She is a peer-reviewed ACT trainer and a fellow in and the current board of directors president of the Association for Contextual Behavioral Science, which is the great overarching organization that folks in the ACT world and related therapies get together and have fun. She's also a certified mindfulness teacher, having studied at UC Berkeley with Drs. Jack Kornfield and Tara Brock. And with Robyn, she has co-authored the ACT Workbook for Anger, as well as collaborating with Robyn on their book, The Heart of ACT. She is also the author of Una Vida Valiosa, A Valued Life, an ACT book for the general public. And Manuela has 30 years of experience in bodywork and somatic training, including certification as a unit Tony teacher. And her clinical work blends somatic experiences with mindfulness, compassion, and ACT through the innovative concept of the embodied metaphor. So welcome to you both. So the title of this episode is Living with Death. So let's talk about it. Why is it that we struggle so much with our own mortality? Some people talk about confronting our mortality, which sounds kind of aggressive. It sounds like there's a fight or flight response associated with it, which wouldn't be surprising. So what is it? What is it about death that gets people so worked up, besides the obvious?
I think that talking about death is becoming very difficult in this culture, but it haven't been for humanity always like that. I do think that we have been losing some spiritual background that made us look by the other side of very unstoppable part of life that we are all going to die. This is a personal thought about it. I think that we have become in a very competitive, goal-oriented culture, and dying doesn't get along very well on goal orientation and competition. And we also have lost the idea of spirituality and rituals that helped in other cultures or in other times of humanity have a framework or a context in which death can have other functions, other impacts, other ways to relate to it.
Yeah, I think that's a terrific answer and reminds us historically how things have evolved over time with relation to death. And then it's just scary, like the human mind and our experience of uncertainty and nothingness lead us, I think, to struggle and avoid those circumstances, just adding on to what Manuela said, is that, we can imagine nothingness or emptiness, which might be part of that fear, but we also can imagine possibilities. Like in many cultures, there's ideas of heaven and hell, and which one will I be in, and is it true? And so there's just so much uncertainty that I think people want to run from that idea. And you can only know death once it's happened, right? And you know it for whatever period you know it. And so that's another scary thing about it. It's not like knowing what peanut butter tastes like, right? It's untastable, which makes it hard to connect to, I think.
It got me thinking, actually. I love your introductions and your how you've both spoken about why, death gets us all worked up. And I think what you said, Manuela, about, being in such a goal-oriented society or, point in the world where it's all about, we talk about this a lot on the podcast, striving and getting somewhere. I feel that it's almost like we need to make sure we get there before we die. Otherwise, what is the point of it all? And part of the fear of death may be that it could take away the meaning of life if we haven't achieved whatever it is that we set ourselves out to achieve or that we think is good enough in order for us to be ready to exit this world. There's a certain narcissistic flavor to that, but, we have to have had a mark or an impact, or because perhaps the idea of being forgotten or hasn't really made a difference is too painful.
Yeah, and also we're in an accumulative culture and where we want to have things, and that is about letting go things. And that's not that easy for most of us. If we think about death, not only in dying, but in small little death that we have along our life, in which we need to learn how to let go of things all the time. People, things we care, things we love. We're going to lose all of them.
Sounds so hard.
Is it?
Yeah, yeah. Is it?
I like questions more than just to see how we have a very embedded way of relating with death. We assume it's scary. We assume it's hard. Is it?
Yeah. I was reading an article the other day that was saying that, fear of death is like a transdiagnostic phenomenon. For those of us who work in the world of mental health, what we mean by transdiagnostic is that it applies to many, many presentations. And I'd never thought of it like that. That, this fear of death sort of can be an underlying layer to a lot of our struggles, a lot of our, grasping, needing, anxieties. And it's a good question. And I think we do really struggle with the idea that it could all be over any minute. I think it's very confronting.
Yeah, no, it is for me as well. But mostly because I really love life, right? I don't want the idea of this coming to an end, or, this thing we call life coming to an end is a little bit challenging for me to bump up against from time to time. And so why I think it's all the more important for me to consider my own death. And I think what it does is it makes me feel more alive now, because I know that this may not always be available to me. And so, those moments that feel so important and precious get just a little bit more color added when you realize that they're not going to go on forever.
Well, there are Buddhist traditions that prescribe a meditating death so that when you come back to living your daily life, whatever that may be, whether it's, the important stuff or the everyday stuff, that it does have a little more vibrancy, a little more color to it, a little more preciousness.
I remember even meditating with Jack Cornfield on a meditation that was this breath, your last breath. This breath, your last breath. This breath, your last breath. It's interesting what happens when you notice your breath as usually in a mindfulness meditation, but you add that this may be your last breath.
I think a lot about, I think it was Marcus Aurelius who said both, live every day as if it were your last, or the other way that that's sometimes stated is perform every act as if it were your last. Sort of getting us in touch with that, how to, it gets into values and work that we do with acceptance and commitment therapy. It's like, how do I want my life to be, even in the smallest things.
It can also be more in a grasping way. I don't know if you all have heard this kind of, this is going to be my last day. I have to grasp things.
Yeah,
So
but
I
desperation.
think, yeah, we are all used to, this is going to be your last breath or your last day, to go more into a values place, but it's not for everyone. Like when facing, because I don't like the word confronting, when facing with this, sometimes what evokes is this more grasping, that I think it's the difficulty around death, as Robyn said.
No, I find that concept of, living every day as if your last is actually calming. It kind of gets me away from the franticness of what I need to accomplish and really focuses me on what I need to do today. But again, that's just me, and I'm grateful that I can use it in that way. So clearly there are other cultures, other ways of thinking about this that have a much saner and healthier way of looking at death and dying. What can we learn from them?
Yeah, I think there is a lot to learn. Like as I sit here, as I'm sitting and listening and thinking about what is it like for me, like very in the way that I was, I haven't been brought up in a particularly spiritual way. And I'd love to learn from cultures that guide me. But as I think about, living and dying, I do notice that grasping and that anxiety. I don't find myself like Chris, embracing every day as if it's my last. I do notice.
Not that I do that perfectly.
But I love that. That is something you can do. Like that's in your repertoire. Like I notice personally, I have moments of that where, like you said, Robyn, there's, thinking about death can help you color those moments with more gratitude and appreciation. But mostly, I'll be honest, mostly it fills me with dread and fear as to, the sadness, the loss. Like you said, Robyn, I love life so much. I love so many humans in this world and so many animals, and there isn't enough time to do everything and taste everything and see everything and read everything. And, I mostly find myself thinking of death as something that, scares me. And I don't know how to do that thing where death becomes the amplifier of my experiences.
Well, it's interesting what you're sharing, Emma, because, would you love everything? Would you connect to everything? Would you feel that quality that you're describing if not for death?
Yeah.
And so it may look very differently if there was no death, and like that tasting of life may not be as relevant or as important, or you might find yourself sort of like inside of the blah of the repetition. And I guess I could love and I guess I could not, right? Like, I think death actually informs us about this and helps us to stand inside of the love that we feel and the meaning that arises out of that knowledge. And so I suppose I hear what you're saying, and I think it scares a lot of people. And I find myself, it's interesting, as I've just been listening to us so far, I can hear the solemnness in some of what we're saying. But for some funny reason, I find myself chuckling just a little bit, like, maybe it doesn't have to be such a solemn conversation.
Yeah.
right? Like maybe we can enter into this in a way where we're looking at it as opportunity and curiosity. And I don't know. I don't want to die. I hear you. I'm out. I like you. Clearly I don't want to do that. And as a part of life, I guess I want to allow it, right? Like I want to be in a space where I recognize its importance, and so that I don't become complacent in a way that everything is just going to slide along for eternity, right? I don't want that for the clients I serve either. Manuela, any thoughts about what I'm sharing?
I love what you're sharing, and also I was noticing how all of us relate in a different way. We're sharing how we are relating with death, and thinking that that's the core about psychological flexibility, is having the opportunities to relate in different ways with what death evokes us. So that's, I think, why Robyn and I do like to merge, like learning to live with death as a learning process, with the work with ACT as a way of learning that. And again, I want to highlight that we don't have enough context, and our clients don't have enough context in which learn to live with death, because this other more spiritual or ritual context has gone away in most of our cultures. So we are trying to work it out on our own with a lot of difficulties. And what if therapy and ACT can become a context that doesn't have to be religious, in which we can learn how to live with that?
Let's bring in the existential piece, the existentialism that you all have written about. My knowledge of existentialism is hearing my older sisters talk about it when they were philosophy majors in college. And when I think of existentialism, I'm thinking of sitting in a corner cafe, smoking Galois and drinking espresso, and saying like profound things. So educate me about that. And how does that help us to make room for this thing we're all going to experience?
Well, so I'll share. I was just thinking about when I was in graduate school, I was quite interested in existentialism. And at University of Nevada, Reno, where I went, you had to do comprehensive exams that were these big deals. And one of my comprehensive exams was a behavioral interpretation of existentialism, which I now kind of chuckle at what I wrote about, because it would be completely different today as I think about some of the things that I said back then in that test. I did pass, by the way. I managed to get by, but so I've been interested forever. And the ways I think about it is that given that we're here, and we're aware that we're here, that what kind of responsibility will we take in that aliveness is essentially the way I think about existentialism, right? Is that if you're here and aware, and you can connect with that you're going to die, how will you move forward in life? So it kind of combines the idea of personal responsibility in life and stepping forward, given that essentially you won't be here and you won't be aware after a certain period of time. So I think when I think about, in combination, my here-ness, my awareness, and choice, then I think it's a kind of ideal setting for what it means to exist, and at least for human beings and maybe other species as well, whatever level of awareness they're at. And that, how you spend your time, how you take responsibility for your time becomes really important inside of that space. And it's described in different ways depending on who you're reading, but I think many of them, like, Yalom and Rollo May and Heidegger and etc., they all have that founding basis of awareness and responsibility.
And I think of it too as sort of, how do we bear all this with with integrity and dignity.
Another way of being responsible, right? Like,
Yeah.
how do we bear this knowledge? Yeah. I think it's, when I'm doing act work, it's often has a lot of existentialism in it. And Manuela and I have done several death-oriented workshops together where we help people connect with this idea of your body ceasing to exist and what you're going to do with the time between now and then. And it's kind of, I think, guides a sense of stepping in. Now, some people, of course, step out. They get this knowledge and they get so anxious and afraid, and some even terrified and horrified by the idea that they just back right out of life and hide, trying to protect themselves from death and from the idea of death. And their lives become very small. It's as if they've died while they're alive. And I guess the work that Manuela and I do is to help folks live while you're still aware and breathing, and not to die before you die, if that makes sense.
I just remembered I have, 3 children and death is a topic. And my daughter, who is going to be 9, a couple of weeks' time, we did a death meditation. But it was the other way round, as in it wasn't really a meditation, it was a conversation. It felt a bit meditative. She said, I think we should live till we're 500. And she said she defined sort of toddlerhood till we're 20. And she had all the sort of ages had sort of flipped. And you became an adult when you were, over 100. And, in a way that just children can do. It got me thinking, like, how would life, and I knew that we were having this conversation. This is by chance that she brought this up. I thought, how would that change the way I approach life if I knew I had 500 years? And it's true that it does perhaps take a little bit of the flavor and the color when you think you've got a long time.
Or when you even know when it's going to happen. In the South American indigenous cultures, one of the things that people ask is to know when they are dying. Yes. So you become a shaman if you know when you're dying. And I think that the not knowing that teaches us death. We don't know what happens, but we also don't know when. That it's very humbling situation. Like, I don't know what will happen. I don't know when it will happen.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And it's so human, isn't it? Because we're all in the same boat.
Yeah.
None of us know. Actually, my sons went through a period where they were asking this question: what would you rather, know when you're going to die or how you're going to die?
Exactly.
We'd have these long conversations about, they're like, but if you knew how, you'd know when. And so we'd have these big conversations, but that we talk about it, we think about it a lot as humans, and it is the ultimate equalizer.
It is the ultimate equalizer. And one of the things that, and to kind of bring us back to some of the things that Manuela introduced us to around the idea of progress and achievement. And it's interesting as that achievement got brought up. One of the things I was thinking about there is that's a human concept, right? Like achievement. I'm pretty sure that, I feel confident in saying this, like the gazelle isn't out there like thinking, I got to achieve, right? Like it's a relatively human concept. Like of course they want to stay alive. Like that's a driving force in all of us. And there's rapid response to danger. But it's interesting, if you watch gazelle herds, once the gazelle has been caught by the lion, the rest of the gazelles will hang out and eat near where the lion is eating. They don't run from death the way we do in this sense of once they're exposed to it. But we have people who don't want to attend funerals and who are so invested in achievement that they, want to look at ways to make their life extend further. And they're getting surgeries and implants and, all of these things to sort of stay alive in a world where that's not what happens. All things rise and fall. And so we've got this kind of interesting combination of minds that move us into achievement, that are different from other animals, and can take us out of like what it means to, I think, really be here and to appreciate that we're here. If that like that we're here, if I can just make it that simple.
This achievement is all about where you're not.
That's exactly right. It's all about where you're not. I have to be somewhere else.
Yeah, I have to be someone else.
Look like someone else, talk like someone else, have money like someone else. On and on and on it goes. And you can see the fallout of it. Like if you just look at what's happening on social media with our youth and the mental health issues that youngsters are bumping up against as they, absorb themselves into social media and compare, and just despair at the idea of not having or not being. And that is, just like you said, Chris, it's removed from here and now. It's about somewhere else. And death is the antidote to that space. But, if you can be on social media hour after hour, you don't have to face it. That's just one example of how we're always got to be somewhere else instead of here.
And while I was hearing you, Robyn, I think that also touches another place in which death, it's an equalizer, that it's the non-becoming, like not non-self aspect of it, in which in this achievement society, we try to be someone and we are becoming someone with each things we are grasping or having or getting or achieving. And I think another scary thing is that we don't know how to live without a concept of self. And we tend to solidify a lot who we are as we work in ACT. So expanding that place of self, that it's not solid, not I am this, but I am aware of all this stuff. I'm the perspective from which we are aware that it's more like in self as context. Well, that relates more and more easily with death, but how difficult is that for most of human beings? Like, who am I? And who's going to die? Is a who that it's going to die?
Yeah, the death of the self.
Yeah. Oof. Would it be possible to take us all, those of us here and our listeners, through an exercise that you had from these workshops that you do?
So I guess what we would do if we were going to do this is have both of you get out a piece of paper and your audience members to take up a piece of paper.
Should I pull out my whiteboard?
You could pull out your whiteboard as well. Yeah.
Okay. I'll be right back.
All right, great. So perfect. So Chris, what I'll have you do, and so that people can do this on their piece of paper at home, is to draw two vertical lines that are about a foot apart from each other on that board. And then draw one line between the two that's perpendicular. And then,
Like so?
Yep, you got it. And then on the line to the left, write birth. And then, so it represents birth, and the line to the left, the vertical ones, write death. So you can think of this as your lifeline, right? And then what I'm going to invite you to do, and I'll invite the audience members to draw something similar to that, and then to place an X on that middle line, the one between birth and death, that where you think you are in your life.
I have no idea. I guess where I hope I am.
Yeah,
so
there's that too.
Yeah, that's a different kind of, that's not where you hope you are, where you think you could be. And then as you do it, I'll just have you notice what shows up for you in that space of looking at where you think you are and noticing the time that's gone before. Yeah, so just looking at the time that's gone before. and then the time that remains. And then I'll invite you to just close your eyes for a minute. And we'll have the audience members do the same. But just...
if you're not driving.
If you're not driving, of course. Yeah. And just take a moment and reflect on where you place that X. Noticing the time that has already passed, whether you're young or older, middle-aged, being aware that you have already lived many days and that there is a significant amount of time that has passed. And just let yourself really come into awareness around that X is going to keep moving in one direction, that you don't get to go back and start again. As you look back across that time that's passed and what you found there that has been meaningful and important, what you've cared about, but also be fully aware that there has been time there spent inside of things that are not what you would like or choose or want to be doing. That maybe you've spent time there that has been about running, hiding, fighting, escaping, only tasting one thing on the menu, however you'd like to think about it. And allow yourself to be fully aware that that other vertical line is coming, the one that represents death. It's on its way. And so I'll just leave you with one question. Between the X and that time point, how will you do it? What will you create? And I invite you, as well as Manuela would, to taste the full menu, to step into what I called earlier as the color of life. But in order to do that well, you'll have to touch, be aware of, connected to, that it will end. And then I'll invite you to take a deep breath. And as you blow out, you can gently open your eyes again. And maybe Emma and Chris, you could share a little bit of your response to walking through that exercise.
I actually put I'm, not yet 50, but I put my X quite a bit. It's not halfway. I was quite surprised with myself, I guess, because I don't know. But as we closed our eyes and I felt very tearful. It was challenging for me to think of. The part that I found most challenging is to think of the life that came before, the life that I've had, in a way that, how many things I have done that have not been useful and helpful, that I have been, sometimes walking around blind to what really matters. And not sometimes, a lot. I know that that's not going to stop today just because I've done this exercise, but that was the bit that hurt the most, like how we can be really distracted by the getting, the doing, the being, and we don't spend time with what perhaps really matters. And we get so entangled by what our life should look like versus perhaps what we would like it to look like. And I felt quite sad thinking of me. And I had to chuckle with your little dog snoring in the background. I was like, see, that's a life worth living. As thinking about death. I love that. It made me feel really warm inside.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. Chris, did you want to say anything?
I was saying earlier before we started recording that my wife and I attended a memorial service yesterday for a dear friend who was like our age, died this last summer, and I'm about to hit my mid-70s, so friends, acquaintances, family members, getting sick and dying, and it's going to be my turn, fairly soon, I would imagine, relative to that line, behind the X. And I can't beat myself up for, all those times I played computer solitaire instead of like writing my magnum opus. So, we all feel like we squandered so much of our lives and have regrets, and we got to hold that stuff lightly too.
Agreed. Okay, I see that. And so now how do I want to move? But of course, we'll all get caught again in the day-to-day and the ups and downs, and then we lose it, and then you come back, and it's a practice, right? It's not a now I know, and I'm not going to do that anymore. It's a returning again and again and again to where am I on this line, and how do I want to do it? How do I want to do it today? How do I want to do it in the next moment? How do I want to do it again after you get caught 1,000 times a day in, achievement or whatever the issue might be? And I sometimes say to clients that I'm working with, like, what if there's not another minute looking back regretting, but the next moment is about choosing and engaging, and that you'll just have to keep doing that until you die.
Yeah, again and again and again.
The gambling, yeah. And thank you guys both for sharing. And yeah, one of the, and maybe Manuela, you want to comment on this as well, but one of the things that I do think is so valuable in what you're bringing up, Chris, is that we are invited to meet death from time to time in our lives, more so when we get older, right? Because people around us are dying that are our age and that kind of thing. But there's, at least for me, and I've heard other people speak about this too, when you confront death in your own life, like my mother died and my brother died. Recently, my father passed away. And there's this period of time just afterwards where you can feel the gravity of life, the sense of, I want to connect, and because we're faced with that we will too be like them, but we lose it. Time passes and we move away from the death and we lose contact with that space. And it's part of why Manuela and I introduce it in workshops and bring it up in other ways, because of the power of the meaning that's inside of that connection to life. And from an existential perspective is what gives meaning. It is what gives meaning. Manuela, I don't know if you want to comment more about.
No, I think that I like to relate to that, and a good friend reminder, like a mindfulness bell that sounds and help me. Reminding in Spanish is recordar, and the Latin meaning of it is go back to your heart. So what I think that what that can remind us, recordar, help us to come back to our heart and realize the possibility to choose, that it's not the mandatory rule to do, but the possibility to choose to live on the edge of each moment. What I want to choose now, and what I want to choose now, and what has heart for me in this moment. So really, I think that a way we have been presenting with Robyn as a way of creating a meaningful life, moment by moment, step by step, not in big things, but in the small way of living. Because sometimes when we get related to death, it looks like, as Emma said, we have to do, I don't know, something really big. And what profoundly can matter to us is, for example, connections. When we lose dear ones, it's like we mourn for the moments that we won't have with that person. The things the perfume, the voice, I was reading that Robyn was posting about her mother's birthday recently, and I got me a warm feeling, like how nice it is to remind us that connection, that person, that death can be a good friend and ally for that.
Any final thoughts, Emma?
I love that idea that death is like the mindfulness spell. And I think that coming back to the beginning of our conversation where you, Manuela, were talking about some of the spiritual practices that have been lost. Like, we don't see death as much until you get to a certain age. But when we have a lot, like in Spain, Catholic tradition is, big families. And when people die, you all go and see the dead body. And I remember talking to that, when I moved to the UK, and people were like, that's just gross. Why would you go and see a dead body? And, back in my mother's time, you would kiss the dead body, as in, she'd kiss her grandfather's body. It was cold. And I think it's true. We don't have that anymore. And what was that for? Well, it's an opportunity to, say goodbye, recognize that connection. I'm not sure that's what my mother thought as a child going to say goodbye to her grandfather, but there is something in that tradition in, when we have big families and we see a lot of death, that death is a symbol of, someone parting means that I will miss them. And then there are rituals around, their birthday, going to visit their grave, or eating their favorite food. Or, we have the 1st of November, the Day of the Dead, you go and visit. So there's these opportunities, and it's being lost. It's being lost as we move abroad. We have different spiritual practices that sort of punctuation where death is a part of our conversations, which, I do see that, having had this conversation, that it is a sharpener of our focus. And I loved what you said, Robyn, about, all things rise and fall. I'm getting to a transition where my body, my brain is changing. I get things. I mean, that never used to happen, but I'm sure it did. But suddenly I'll be saying something and I can't remember the word. And something very humbling about that, and very annoying. But yeah, the rise and fall. And that makes me appreciate that the times that I do remember the words, or, the times that my body does feel, strong. So I do think I can see that. And I can see that that is a practice, because it's very easy to look at the fall, not the rises. Look at all the falls and see what's wrong, how it's bad, how it's problematic, how it's suffering, versus there's something quite humbling, but quite connecting about that. So those are my final thoughts. And how do we bring death more into our conversations? Yeah, because as a society, we have turned our back on it, I think.
I do think if we were more aware of death, we'd be doing things like taking care of our planet and the animals and nature, and seeing ourselves as part of it. That nature rises and falls, and so do we. But as we disconnect from these places that Manuela was sharing, we disconnect from that space and chase something that is about the youth and eternity and those kinds of things. And I don't know, I think that there's something sweet in a sunset, and something lovely in a hummingbird's flight, and something beautiful in the snore of my dog, and something amazing in the look of an elephant, or or the feel of a tree. And I guess when I think about not being here anymore, I know I'm going to miss those things. Well, I'll be dead. So it's kind of a funny thing. But as I think about my death, those are the things that I'm going to miss. And so what I have the opportunity to do now is go be next to a tree. You see what I'm saying? Like, I can go be with those things that I care about. And I guess that's what would build a meaningful life for me. Death is my ally, as Manuela says. And Manuela, I don't know if you want to add.
It was just listening, realizing that for me, death has brought me a sense of belonging to something more than myself. And I truly value that. That's my little 2 cents about it.
What do you feel that is belonging you mean to the world? Like a sense of...
Like, the plant will die, I will die.
Yeah.
The tree will die, the bird will die, I will die. So that kind of common fate for all living things brings me a sense of belonging. a plant like me will die. I will die like a plant, and I will die like the tree. The tree will die like me. My cat here that you saw, her tail will die, and I will die as her.
The ultimate belonging.
Exactly. It's funny because we never think about belonging in there, isn't it? Yeah.
And it's the invitation to care, like Robyn said, right?
Exactly.
That comes off the back of that.
A care that it's a non-self care.
Yeah, that's right.
If you could all indulge me, I'd like to read something that was read at my father's funeral. It's brief, but it's the opening paragraph to Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologica. The road that stretches before us is a challenge to the heart long before it tests the strength of our legs. Our destiny is to run to the edge of the world and beyond, often to the darkness, sure for all our blindness, secure for all our helplessness, strong for all our weakness, gaily in love for all the pressure on our hearts. I think that was very apt. That's very so that's gaily in love for all the pressure on our hearts.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
All right. Well, it's been quite the conversation. Thank you so much for all you do to work with people in your workshops and your writings to help people navigate this journey right on through the end. It's a great gift.
Yeah, it really is. I didn't think that a conversation about death would be invigorating. Then I feel like an invitation now, to hold life more intentionally, having spoken about death, and how I love that idea that death is, that mindfulness bell, that invitation to, make things, matter, but not in that graspy way, but in that, how does this help me? Yeah, tenderness, lightness, care. I think the piece around care has got me really. And I think that there was something about spirituality, which we haven't talked about, which, lends it, us to this more.
Well, that mindfulness bell is an invitation to show up.
Yeah.
Show up to what matters.
What really matters. And I remember listening to someone talking about, I can't remember where it was, but, people on their deathbed, what do they say they regret? They don't regret not having, been in the sort of, Forbes list of the top 100. Well, maybe somebody do, but not the ones in this book. What they regret are the things the connections that they didn't repair. They regret not having spent more time with the people they love. It's all about connection. That's what we regret on our deathbed. And, more recently, one of my dear family members has been diagnosed with a terminal illness. And it's been, incredibly moving to see him and his partner turn towards life more, like much more intensely. And it's been an invitation for everybody really to think, what do I want to spend whatever I have left? What do I want to spend my time with? And who do I want to spend it with? But yeah, it's been a gift in a way, obviously incredibly sad, but it's a gift to everybody around us to witness the courage with which they're embracing this a diagnosis, but an incredible invitation for all of us to step up to that too.
We will have your books in the show notes. And if there's anything else in the way of resources that you think would be useful for our listeners to have in show notes, shoot us an email and we'll get that in there. And again, thank you so much for this great conversation. Very, very important.
Thank you for all of us for showing up to this conversation. I think that, it's so meaningful to show up a little bit for living with that.
Yeah, thank you.
My pleasure. It's good to see you guys.
Yes, always.
Take care.
Yeah, good to see you.